My name is Jake, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas, with my wife, Emily. We've been married for 8 years, and although we don't have kids, we've built a life filled with shared dreams and memories. Our house is a cozy two-story with a garden Emily adores, filled with flowers and vegetables that she tends to with love. She's always been passionate about her work as a graphic designer, freelancing from home, while I work as a project manager at a tech firm downtown. Life has been pretty smooth for us, or so I thought. Emily and I used to be very close, sharing everything from our deepest fears to our wildest dreams. We'd often spend weekends exploring the city, trying out new restaurants, or just lounging around watching movies. But over the past few months, something has changed. Emily has become distant, often absorbed in her phone or computer, and our once lively conversations have dwindled into mere exchanges of daily updates. It was subtle at first. She'd be lost in thought during dinner, her responses to my questions short and distracted. When I asked her what was wrong, she'd just smile and say she was tired from work. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that this was just a phase, that things would go back to the way they were. But deep down, a nagging feeling told me that something was off. As days turned into weeks, the distance between us grew. Emily started going out more, claiming she needed to meet clients or attend work-related events. She'd come home late, sometimes smelling faintly of alcohol and perfume. When I questioned her, she'd get defensive, accusing me of being paranoid and controlling. It was unlike her, this anger and irritation, and it left me feeling confused and hurt. One evening, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise her with dinner. As I walked through the door, I heard her voice coming from the living room. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but her tone was soft, almost flirtatious. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call and smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just a client," she replied a bit too quickly. We were discussing some design ideas for a new project. I wanted to believe her, but something about her response didn't sit right with me. The doubts that had been simmering in my mind began to bubble up, and I knew I needed to find out what was really going on. That night, as Emily slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. Was she seeing someone else? Was our marriage falling apart? I felt a knot in my stomach, a mix of fear and anger that kept me from finding any rest. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. And so I decided to keep a closer eye on her, to look for any signs that might confirm my worst suspicions. The next few weeks were a blur of mounting tension and suspicion. Emily's behavior grew more erratic. She was constantly on her phone, even more so than before, and often left the room to take calls. She started dressing differently too, sexier, more provocatively, claiming it was just a way to feel more confident at work. One Saturday afternoon, while Emily was out running errands, I decided to do some investigating. I searched through her phone and laptop, looking for any clues, but she had become more cautious, and there were no incriminating messages or emails. Frustrated, I decided to dig deeper. I installed a tracking app on her phone, something I never thought I'd resort to, but my desperation outweighed my guilt. The app didn't reveal much at first, just her usual trips to the grocery store, the gym, and the occasional coffee shop. But then, one evening, she told me she was meeting a client for dinner. The tracker showed her location at a restaurant across town. Curious, I decided to follow her. I parked a few blocks away and walked to the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest. Through the window, I saw her sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing, their faces close together, and she reached out to touch his hand. My blood boiled at the sight. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak that left me feeling sick to my stomach. When Emily came home that night, I confronted her. "How was dinner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It was good," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "Just a typical client meeting." "Really?" I said, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "Because I saw you with that man. Who is he, Emily?" Her face went pale, and for a moment she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then her expression hardened, and she glared at me. "You followed me?" she snapped. "What the hell, Jake? Do you really not trust me?" "I don't know what to trust anymore," I shot back. "You've been acting so strange. And now I find you having dinner with some guy? What am I supposed to think? Emily's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought she might confess. But instead, she turned away, her voice trembling with anger. I can't believe you're doing this, she said. I've been working so hard, trying to keep everything together, and this is how you repay me? By spying on me? I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but the pain in her voice stopped me. I didn't know what to say, and so I just stood there, feeling helpless and lost. Emily brushed past me and went upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I sank onto the couch, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. I had hoped for answers, but all I had were more questions. What was happening to us? And how much longer could we keep living like this? That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily with that man, their laughter, their closeness. It was like a dagger in my heart, twisting deeper with every thought. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And so, I resolved to find out who that man was and what he meant to Emily. Only then could I decide what to do next. The following week was a blur of anxiety and relentless determination. I couldn't shake the image of Emily and that man from my mind. I had to know who he was and what role he played in my wife's life. The tracking app continued to provide me with locations, but I needed more concrete evidence. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, I took her phone and went through her messages again. This time, I was more thorough. I found a hidden folder in her photo gallery, password protected. My heart raced as I attempted various combinations until finally I guessed correctly. Our anniversary date. The folder opened, revealing a series of photos and videos of Emily with the same man from the restaurant. There was no mistaking their intimacy. In one video, they were at a hotel room, laughing and talking in hushed tones. My heart shattered as I watched them kiss, their passion undeniable. The evidence was irrefutable. Emily was having an affair. The betrayal I felt was overwhelming. I could barely breathe as I continued to watch, each image and video a knife to my heart. When I heard the shower stop, I quickly closed the folder and put her phone back. I needed a plan, a way to confront her that would force her to tell the truth. The next day, I called in sick to work and hired a private investigator. His name was Frank, an older man with a no-nonsense attitude and a reputation for uncovering the truth. I provided him with all the information I had, including the photos and videos. Frank assured me he would get to the bottom of it. Days turned into weeks as Frank gathered more evidence. Emily's lies continued, her behavior growing more erratic. She became more secretive, often leaving the house without explanation. The distance between us was a chasm, filled with unspoken words and hidden truths. Finally, Frank called me with the information I needed. The man in the photos was named Jason, a married man with a reputation for having affairs with his clients. He worked in advertising, and Emily had met him at a networking event months ago. Frank provided me with detailed reports, including photos of them entering hotels together, timestamps, and even audio recordings of their conversations. Armed with this evidence, I prepared for the inevitable confrontation. I decided to wait until Emily's next client meeting. I knew she would meet Jason, and I would catch them in the act. The night arrived, and Emily left the house, dressed impeccably and wearing the perfume I had bought her for our last anniversary. My heart ached as I watched her leave, knowing what was about to happen. I waited a few minutes before following her, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I arrived at the hotel Frank had mentioned in his reports. I parked my car a few blocks away and walked to the entrance, my heart pounding. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I made my way to the elevator, heading to the floor Frank had specified. My palms were sweaty, my breath shallow. I could feel my pulse in my ears, a steady drumbeat of dread and anger. When I reached the door to their room, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to turn back, to pretend none of this was happening. But I knew I couldn't live in ignorance. I needed the truth, no matter how painful. I knocked on the door, my knuckles rapping sharply against the wood. There was a moment of silence, followed by hushed voices. The door opened, and there stood Emily, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. Behind her, Jason stood, his shirt half buttoned and a look of panic on his face. "Jake?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper, her face pale. "Surprised to see me?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "I know everything, Emily. About you and Jason. I have proof." Her eyes filled with tears. and she took a step back, her hand covering her mouth. Jake, I can explain. Explain? I interrupted, my anger bubbling to the surface. Explain how you've been lying to me for months. How you've been sneaking around behind my back. There's nothing to explain, Emily. I saw the photos, the videos. I hired a private investigator. It's over. Jason moved to stand beside Emily, his expression shifting from panic to defiance. Look, man, this is between you and Emily. Leave me out of it. I turned my gaze to him, my fists clenching. Oh, believe me, Jason, you're not getting off that easily. You think you can just sleep with another man's wife and walk away? You're going to regret this. Emily stepped forward, her tears flowing freely now. Jake, please. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Her words felt like hollow echoes, meaningless in the face of her betrayal. Sorry? I laughed bitterly. You think sorry is going to fix this? You've destroyed our marriage, Emily. You've shattered my trust. There's no coming back from this. The room was filled with a heavy silence, the weight of our shattered relationship hanging in the air. Emily's sobs were the only sound, each one a painful reminder of the life we had lost. Finally, I turned and walked away, leaving her and Jason behind. As I left the hotel, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. The next morning, Emily was waiting for me when I came downstairs. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept at all. I felt a pang of pity but quickly pushed it aside. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. Jake, we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling. There's nothing left to talk about, Emily, I replied coldly. You've said and done enough. Please, just hear me out, she pleaded. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, fix what's broken. I shook my head, the anger and pain still raw. You think counseling is going to fix this? You think sitting in a room and talking about our feelings is going to erase what you did? You betrayed me, Emily. You lied to me. You had an affair with another man. There's no coming back from that. She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. I know I hurt you, Jake. I know I broke your trust. But I still love you. I never stopped loving you. Love? I spat, my anger boiling over. You call what you did love? You think sneaking around lying to my face and fucking another man is love? You don't know the meaning of the word. Her tears flowed freely now, and she fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, Jake, give me another chance. I can't lose you. I can't lose us. I looked down at her, my heart breaking all over again. But I knew I couldn't let her back in. I couldn't forgive her for what she had done. It's too late, Emily. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing on the floor. The house felt empty and cold, a reflection of the void in my heart. I knew the road ahead would be long and painful, but I also knew I couldn't let her betrayal define me. I had to find a way to move forward, to rebuild my life from the ashes of our broken marriage. Emily moved out the following week. It was her decision, and one I didn't fight. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a mausoleum of memories and broken promises. I threw myself into work, trying to fill the void left by her absence. But the anger and betrayal simmered beneath the surface, threatening to consume me. One evening, as I was cleaning out the garage, I found an old box filled with photographs and mementos from our early years together. I should have thrown them away, but instead, I sat down and sifted through them, feeling a mix of nostalgia and bitterness. That's when I made the decision. Emily and Jason weren't going to get away with this. They needed to feel the pain they had inflicted on me. I reached out to Frank, the private investigator. We met at a small diner on the outskirts of town, a place where no one would recognize us. Frank listened as I outlined my plan, his expression impassive. You sure about this, Jake? He asked, his voice gruff. Once you start down this path, there's no turning back. I'm sure, I replied, my voice steady. I need to see them suffer. I need them to know what it feels like to be betrayed. Frank nodded, his eyes dark with understanding. All right, I'll help you. But be careful. Revenge has a way of consuming everything. Over the next few weeks, Frank and I gathered information. We found out that Jason was not only cheating on his wife, but also embezzling money from his company. We compiled the evidence and sent it anonymously to Jason's boss and his wife Amanda. The fallout was immediate. Jason was fired from his job, and Amanda filed for divorce, taking their children and moving out of their home. Emily, meanwhile, was struggling to find a place to live. She had been staying with friends, but her welcome was wearing thin. I knew she was in contact with Jason, trying to lean on him for support. But with his life in shambles, he wasn't much help. One evening, I received a frantic call from Emily. She was crying, her voice barely recognizable through the sobs. "Jake, please, I need your help. I have nowhere else to go." "Why would I help you, Emily?" I asked coldly. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." "Please," she begged. "I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you, but I'm desperate. I don't know what to do." Her desperation was palpable, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of pity. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, and the pain she had caused. "You'll figure it out," I said, and hung up. As the days turned into weeks, the news of Jason's downfall spread through our social circle. People whispered about the scandal, and Emily's reputation took a nosedive. She lost clients and friends, her once thriving business now struggling to stay afloat. It was satisfying, watching her fall from grace, knowing that she was feeling a fraction of the pain she had caused me. But it wasn't enough. I needed something more, something that would make her truly understand the depth of her betrayal. I reached out to Amanda, Jason's soon-to-be ex-wife. We met at a coffee shop, both of us wary but united by our shared pain. "I want to help you," I told her. "I want to make sure Jason and Emily pay for what they've done." Amanda looked at me, her eyes hard. "What do you have in mind?" "Jason's been hiding assets," I said. "I have proof. If you use this in the divorce proceedings, you'll get everything. He'll be left with nothing." Amanda's expression softened, and she nodded. "Thank you, Jake. I appreciate this." We worked together, sharing information and strategizing. The divorce proceedings were brutal, with Amanda's lawyer tearing Jason apart in court. The judge ruled in Amanda's favor, granting her full custody of the children and most of their assets. Jason was left penniless and alone, his reputation in ruins. Emily, meanwhile, was served with a lawsuit from one of her former clients, accusing her of breach of contract. The stress and financial strain took their toll, and she ended up moving back in with her parents, a shadow of the woman she once was. As I watched the pieces of their lives crumble, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. They had both betrayed me, and now they were paying the price. But the victory was bittersweet. The anger and pain were still there, gnawing at me, a constant reminder of what I had lost. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of my former life, I realized that revenge hadn't brought me the peace I had hoped for. It had consumed me, turning me into someone I barely recognized. I knew I needed to find a way to move forward, to let go of the anger and rebuild my life. Months passed and the dust began to settle. Emily reached out to me again, this time through a letter. She asked to meet, saying she wanted to talk, to apologize. Part of me didn't want to see her, but another part needed closure. I agreed to meet her at a park where we used to spend lazy Sundays together. When I arrived, Emily was already there, sitting on a bench, looking fragile and worn. She stood up when she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for coming, Jake," she said softly. I nodded, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Emily?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I wanted to apologize, truly apologize for everything I did. I know I can't undo the hurt I caused, but I needed to tell you how sorry I am." Her words were sincere, but the wound was still fresh. "Why now?" I asked. "Why didn't you come to me when this all started?" "I was scared," she admitted. "I was lonely and made terrible choices. Jason was a mistake, and I know that now. I've lost everything because of my actions." "Actions have consequences," I said, my voice firm. "You didn't just hurt me, Emily. You destroyed our marriage, our trust. You lied to me over and over." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I've been trying to put my life back together, but it's so hard. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say this." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Finally, I spoke. "I appreciate your apology, but it doesn't change what happened. We're done, Emily. I've moved on, and you need to do the same." She looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness and regret. "I understand. I just hope that someday you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." "Forgiveness isn't about you," I replied. "It's about me finding peace. And right now, I'm not there yet." With that, I stood up and walked away, leaving Emily behind. It was the last conversation we would ever have, a final goodbye to a chapter of my life that had been filled with both love and heartbreak. The divorce proceedings were straightforward, given the mountain of evidence against Emily. My lawyer, Marcia, ensured that everything was in order. Emily didn't contest the divorce. She knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. We divided our assets, and I kept the house, a hollow victory that felt more like a burden than a prize. Sitting in the courtroom, listening to the judge finalize our divorce, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The marriage that had once been the cornerstone of my life was now officially over. Emily looked broken, her eyes downcast, as the judge declared our marriage dissolved. There were no dramatic outbursts, no last-minute pleas, just the cold, sterile ending of what had once been a warm, loving relationship. As we left the courtroom, Emily approached me one last time. "I'm so sorry, Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, unable to muster any words. I turned and walked away, leaving behind the woman who had once been my everything. Part 8. New Life. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I sold the house, unable to bear the memories that haunted every corner. I moved into a new apartment, a fresh start in a place that held no ghosts of the past. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects and responsibilities. My colleagues were supportive, and I even made a few new friends. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. I took up old hobbies, like running and painting, finding solace in the simple joys of life. Therapy became a lifeline, a place where I could unpack the emotions that still weighed me down. Dr. Ellis, my therapist, helped me navigate the labyrinth of my feelings, guiding me towards a place of understanding and acceptance. "You're making great progress, Jake," he said during one session. "It's okay to feel pain, but it's also okay to find joy again." His words resonated with me, and I began to open myself up to new experiences. I started dating again, cautiously at first, but with a growing sense of hope. I met someone special, a woman named Sarah who was kind and understanding. She knew about my past, and we took things slow, building a relationship based on trust and respect. One sunny afternoon, as Sarah and I walked hand in hand through the park, I realized how far I had come. The pain of the past had not disappeared, but it had softened, making room for new memories and new love. I had learned that life was not about avoiding pain, but about finding the strength to move forward, to rebuild and embrace the future. As we sat on a bench, watching the world go by, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but I also knew I had the resilience to face them. "Thank you for being here with me," I said to Sarah, squeezing her hand. She smiled, her eyes warm. "Thank you for letting me in, Jake." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength found in the darkest times, and for the new beginnings that awaited me. My journey was far from over, but I was ready to face whatever came next, with hope in my heart and the knowledge that I had the power to heal and rebuild. Life had taught me that while pain was inevitable, so was growth. And as I walked forward into the future, I knew I was no longer defined by the betrayal and heartbreak of the past, but by the strength and resilience I had found within myself.